My husband texted from Vegas, just married your sister. You're pathetic, by the way. I replied, cool. Then I blocked his cards and changed the house locks. Next morning, police were at my door. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. It was a Tuesday. I find it strange now, how I always circle back to that simple fact. As if the day of the week could somehow contain the magnitude of what happened. But it was a Tuesday in October, the kind where a little chill sneaks in after the sun goes down, reminding you that winter is on its way. I was curled up on the sofa, a soft chenille blanket pulled over my lap, watching some late-night host make jokes about politics. The house was quiet. It wasn't an empty quiet, it was a settled quiet, the comfortable silence built over 15 years of a shared life with my husband, Gary. It was the hum of the refrigerator, the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the background noise of a life I thought was stable, predictable. A life I thought was mine. Gary was away on his annual sales conference in Las Vegas. He was a regional manager for an industrial parts company, ball bearings, I think. Something profoundly uninteresting that paid the bills. I never went with him on these trips. He always said they were a bore, just endless seminars and stuffy hotel conference rooms and forced dinners with colleagues. I never minded. It gave me a few days of peace, a small vacation from my own life. I'd have the entire bed to myself, watch the shows he hated, and eat cereal for dinner if I felt like it. It was our routine. A comfortable, predictable routine. That afternoon, I'd texted him a picture of the autumn leaves in the backyard, a burst of red and gold. Hope the seminars aren't too boring. I wrote. He never replied. I didn't think much of it. He was probably in a meeting or out to that steak dinner he always talked about. My phone, lying face down on the end table, buzzed against the wood. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. I figured it was him, finally texting good night. I picked it up and smiled, expecting a simple, night, hon. It was 2:47 a.m. His name was on the screen, but what appeared below it wasn't a text. It was a picture. The quality was poor, bathed in the garish, electric pink glow of a Vegas chapel sign. Gary stood there, his arms slung possessively around a woman in a short, tight, satin and lace white dress that looked like it came from a discount store. She was holding up a piece of paper, a marriage certificate, and beaming a smile so wide it looked painful. Gary was grinning, too, a smug, triumphant smirk that I hadn't seen on his face since he got his last big promotion. The woman was my sister. My little sister, Cheryl. I think I stopped breathing. I remember staring at her face. The same nose, the same eyes that I had. I taught her how to put on mascara for her first school dance. I held her hand when she got her ears pierced. I gave her the down payment for her first car. My sister. Then my eyes scanned down to the words underneath the photo. 5 sentences. 5 sentences that were like stones being thrown, one by one, through the window of my life. Just married Cheryl. Been sleeping with her for 8 months. Your boring, predictable life made this so easy. Enjoy your sad little world. The words didn't compute. My brain tried to reject them, to categorize them as a sick joke, a prank. 8 months. My mind raced backward, a frantic flipbook of the last year. The whispered phone calls he'd taken in the other room, which he'd claimed were about a difficult client. The sudden overtime at work. The way Cheryl had been so distant lately, so evasive. It was all there, a constellation of red flags I had been too blind, too trusting, to see. The air thickened. My ears started to ring, a low, persistent hum. The TV host's voice became a distorted, meaningless warble. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. A strange, glacial calm spread through my veins, freezing the panic and the pain before it could even start. It was as if the emotional part of my brain just shut down, and a different, older, more reptilian part took control. The part that was built for survival. I lowered the phone and looked around the living room. Our living room. The photos on the mantelpiece, us on our wedding day, us on a trip to the Grand Canyon, us with my parents at Christmas. All of it, a lie. A carefully curated museum of a life that wasn't real. He was expecting a meltdown. He and Cheryl, they were probably huddled together in some tacky hotel room, waiting for my hysterical, tearful phone call. They wanted to hear me break. They wanted the drama, the satisfaction of my pain. I picked up the phone again. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I thought of all the things I could say, all the rage and betrayal I could pour into a message. But why? Why give them the satisfaction? They didn't deserve my words. They didn't deserve my anger. I typed a single word. For letters that felt colder and harder than steel. Cool. I pressed send. And in that moment, Brenda Martin, the boring, predictable wife, died. Someone else was born. The moment I hit send, a switch flipped. The world, which had been fuzzy and distant, snapped into sharp focus. The grief and shock were still there, of course, but I packed them into a small, tight box and shoved them into a corner of my mind. There would be time for that later. Now was the time for action. I walked into my small home office, the command center of our lives, though Gary never saw it that way. He saw it as the place where I did my little projects and paid the bills. He had no idea it was the place where the real power resided. Years ago, after he'd forgotten to pay the property taxes and we'd nearly lost the house, I took over everything. He'd invested a chunk of our savings in a friend's can't-miss startup that missed. After that, I made it clear, I handle the money. All of it. He handed it over with a shrug of relief, happy to be free of the burden. He thought it was a chore. I knew it was control. My fingers were steady as I tapped the spacebar on my computer, waking it from sleep. The screen cast a blue glow on my face in the darkroom. I started a mental checklist, methodical and precise. First, the plastic. Gary had a wallet full of credit cards, but they were all just extensions of my own accounts. I logged into the American Express portal, the password a string of characters from my favorite novel, something you would never guess. There it was, authorized users. His name and photo smiled back at me. I clicked the small remove button. A box popped up, this action is immediate and cannot be undone. Are you sure? A grim smile touched my lips. Yes, I clicked. I did the same for the Capital One card, the Chase card, even the department store card we only used for Christmas shopping. In less than 5 minutes, Gary's purchasing power had been reduced to whatever cash he had in his pocket. Next, the bank. Our main account was at a local credit union, an account I had opened in my name long before our wedding. His salary was direct deposited into it, and he had a debit card linked to it. I didn't remove him from the account, that would take paperwork. But I did something better. I logged in, the password my grandmother's maiden name. I navigated to the transfer funds page. I selected the checking account. For the destination, I chose my high-yield savings account at a completely different, online-only bank. An account he didn't know existed, where I kept my what-if fund. I entered the amount, leaving exactly $158.22 in the checking account. Enough to cover the gas bill that was on autopay tomorrow, but not enough for a plane ticket or a fancy hotel room. Transfer complete. The cell phone was next. Our family plan. Under my name, of course. I went to the provider's website. I could have just cancelled his line, but that felt too clean. Instead, I found the option to report his phone as stolen. A few clicks, and his service was suspended. No calls, no data. He was on an island, and I had just pulled up the bridges. By 3:15 a.m., I was done with the digital demolition. I leaned back in my chair, the silence of the house pressing in. The box of pain in the corner of my mind was rattling, but I ignored it. There was one more thing to do. The most important thing. I needed to secure the perimeter. I picked up my phone and searched for a 24-hour locksmith. The first result was Liberty Locksmith. I dialed. A groggy voice answered. Liberty, Mike speaking. Hello, Mike, I said, my voice as even as a frozen lake. My name is Brenda Martin. I have an emergency and I need every exterior lock on my house changed immediately. There was a long pause. Ma'am, it's after 3 in the morning. Is there a threat? Should I call the police? No police necessary, thank you, I said. The threat has been neutralized, but I need to ensure my home is secure. Front door, back door, and the side door to the garage. That's a premium emergency call-out, ma'am. It'll be $300. I understand, I said. I will have $400 in cash waiting for you if you can be at my address in the next 30 minutes. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. I'm putting my boots on now, he said. Text me the address. While I waited, I performed one final, cathartic task. I went through the house like a quiet storm, gathering his possessions. His clothes from the closet, his shoes from the rack, his smelly gym bag from the laundry room. I found his golf clubs in the garage and his collection of pristine, unopened Star Wars figures in the attic. I piled it all in the front entryway, a monument to a man who no longer lived here. It was strangely satisfying. These objects, once so familiar, now looked like junk left behind by a stranger. At exactly 4 a.m., a white van pulled silently into the driveway. Mike was a big, burly man with kind, tired eyes. He saw the mountain of men's clothing and gear piled by the door, looked at my calm, determined face, and his expression softened with understanding. He didn't ask a single question. You show me the locks, ma'am, was all he said. The sound of his power drill was a declaration of independence. Whir, click. A new deadbolt. Whir, click. A new handle set. By 5 a.m., as the sky began to lighten from black to a bruised purple, my house was a fortress. I handed Mike $400 and a $50 tip. Thank you, I said. You have no idea. He just nodded. Stay safe, ma'am. I closed my new, solid front door, and the final, satisfying thud of the deadbolt sliding into place echoed through the hall. My home was mine again. I went upstairs, stripped off my clothes, got into the cool, empty space on my side of the bed, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I was jolted awake by a sound that bypasses the ears and goes straight to the adrenal gland, hard, rhythmic pounding on the front door. Not a social knock. A summons. My eyes snapped open. The clock on the nightstand read 8:15 a.m. Sunlight was streaming through the blinds. For a disoriented second, I thought I'd dreamed it all, the text, the locksmith, the cold fury. Then I felt the vast emptiness in the bed next to me, and it all came rushing back. The pounding came again, louder this time. I slid out of bed, my heart a steady drum against my ribs. I wasn't afraid. The fear had been burned out of me sometime around 3 a.m. What I felt was a grim sense of inevitability. I pulled on my silk robe, cinched the belt tight, and walked downstairs. Through the peephole, I saw the uniforms. 2 of them. Their patrol car was parked at the curb. Of course. This was his next move. Play the victim. Call the authorities. I took a deep, calming breath, turned the heavy, unfamiliar deadbolt, and opened the door. Good morning, officers, I said. My voice was clear and steady. The older one had a thick mustache and the weary eyes of a man who had seen too many domestic disputes end badly. Are you Brenda Martin, ma'am? I am. We got a call from your husband, Gary Martin, he said, consulting a small notepad. He's stating that you've illegally locked him out of his residence. He's also making some claims about theft of property and access to his salary. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. I kept my face a perfect mask of polite concern. My husband, Gary? I asked, as if confused. Is he here? I'd like to speak with him. He's en route from the airport, ma'am. He had to call from a landline, said his cell phone wasn't working for some reason. The officer looked at me, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. He sounds quite agitated. He wants us to make sure he can get into the house. He says his key isn't working. Oh, his key won't work, I said, nodding. I had the locks changed. For security reasons. I let that hang in the air for a moment before continuing. Officers, there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding here. First of all, this isn't his residence. It's mine. I am the sole name on the deed. The house was purchased using funds from an inheritance from my grandmother, a full 2 years before I married Mr. Martin. The younger cop shifted on his feet, looking from me to his partner. He clearly thought this was just another messy she said. And second, I said, picking up my phone from the hall table where I'd left it, while I appreciate his concern, Mr. Martin is no longer my husband. The older officer frowned. Ma'am, with all due respect, that's for a court to decide. You can't just declare a marriage over. Ordinarily, you'd be right, I agreed. But Gary has a tendency to rush things. You see, he got married yesterday. To someone else. I turned the phone screen towards them. I had the picture and the text message ready. I watched them lean in to read. I saw the exact moment the story clicked into place for them. The younger cop's eyes widened, and he quickly looked away, fighting a smile. The older cop, however, just stared at the screen. He read the text twice. He looked at the grinning faces of Gary and my sister. He then lifted his gaze and looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a sort of weary, astonished respect. He let out a low whistle. Is that? My sister, yes, I finished for him. He shook his head, looking back at the phone. Well, I'll be damned. As if on cue, his radio crackled. Unit 7, what's the status at the Martin residence? Complainant is on the line again, asking why we haven't breached the door. The older officer didn't take his eyes off me as he lifted the radio. Dispatch, stand by. He looked at me. Ma'am, about his belongings? Packed and ready to go, I said. Stacked neatly in the foyer. I haven't touched a thing that wasn't exclusively his. He nodded, then keyed the radio. Dispatch, advise the complainant that this is a civil matter and we will not be forcing entry. The residence is the sole property of Ms. Martin. He paused, and I could see the ghost of a smile under his mustache. You can also advise him that Ms. Martin has presented evidence that he committed felony bigamy in Clark County, Nevada, approximately 6 hours ago. We can have a detective meet him at the airport if he'd like to file a formal complaint. The response from the radio was not from the dispatcher. It was a raw, unfiltered shriek of pure rage. It was Gary, clearly on speakerphone at the dispatch center. He was screaming my name, screaming about his rights, about his lawyer, about his money. It was the sound of a man whose perfectly constructed world had just been obliterated. The younger cop bit his lip, his shoulders shaking with silent laughter. The older one calmly keyed the radio again. Sir, you need to calm down and contact an attorney. We are clearing the scene. He turned back to me. I have a feeling you'll be hearing from his lawyer, ma'am. I'm counting on it, I said. I've already retained one of my own. They wished me a good day and walked back to their car. I closed the door, slid the heavy bolt into place, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. Round 1 was over. And I had one. I spent the rest of the morning on the phone with Margaret, the divorce lawyer. Her voice was like gravel and silk, a combination of tough and smooth that was immensely reassuring. I explained the situation, from the 2:47 a.m. text to the police visit. When I told her about the bigamy, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Brenda," she finally said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, "some clients bring me a mess. You've brought me a gift-wrapped slam dunk." She told me not to engage, not to speak with him or my sister, and to document everything. The adrenaline from the morning had worn off, leaving me feeling hollowed out and shaky. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the backyard. The beautiful red and gold leaves I'd texted him about yesterday seemed to mock me. I felt a wave of grief so profound it almost buckled me. This was my life. My family. My sister. How had this happened? I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't hear the car until it was already in the driveway. I looked up and my blood ran cold. It was my mother's sensible beige Buick. And then the doors opened. 1, 2, 3, 4. Gary emerged from the passenger side, his face puffy and red with rage. Cheryl slid out of the back, looking small and pale, pulling her cardigan tight around herself as if she were cold. My other sister, Janet, got up from behind Cheryl, her arms crossed, a familiar look of judgmental disapproval on her face. And finally, my mother, Eleanor, stepped out of the driver's seat, her purse clutched in her hand like a weapon. It wasn't a visit. It was a planned, coordinated assault. An intervention where I was the one being intervened upon. They marched up to the front door, a united front of betrayal and delusion. The doorbell rang, a shrill, demanding chime. I didn't move. It rang again, and then the pounding started. "Brenda, I know you're in there. Open this door this instant." It was my mother's voice, the one that could still make me feel like a disobedient child. I walked to the door and slid the chain lock into place before opening it a few inches. The four of them stood there, a portrait of misplaced righteousness. "What do you want?" I asked. Gary tried to push the door open, but the chain held firm. "What do I want? I want into my house. I want my cards turned back on. What the hell is wrong with you?" "There's nothing wrong with me, Gary," I said, my voice dangerously calm. I looked over his shoulder at the three women who were supposed to be my family. "Mom. Janet. What are you doing here?" "We are here to talk some sense into you," my mother said, her voice sharp. "You are making a scene. You are embarrassing this family. Whatever spat you and Gary are having, you need to resolve it like adults. Now, take this chain off and let your husband and your sister inside." The casual cruelty of her words, "your husband and your sister," was like a physical blow. I felt the last shred of hope, the tiny, foolish part of me that thought my mother would take my side, wither and die. "He is not my husband," I said through gritted teeth. "And she is not my sister. Not anymore." Janet scoffed. "Oh, here we go. Saint Brenda, the martyr. You've always been so dramatic. You probably drove him to it with your constant nagging and your spreadsheets for everything. It must have been suffocating." That was Janet. Always jealous, always ready with a cutting remark disguised as brutal honesty. I ignored her. I looked at Gary. "You have 1 hour to remove your belongings from my property. They are in the foyer. After that, I will have them disposed of." Then I looked at Cheryl. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I hope you're happy," I said to her, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I hope it was all worth it." "Brenda, that's enough," my mother snapped. "No," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "It's not enough. You want to talk about embarrassment? This is embarrassment. Standing on my porch defending a cheat and a bigamist. You should all be ashamed of yourselves." I leveled my gaze at Gary and Cheryl. I had a very productive morning call with my new lawyer, Margaret. She was very interested to learn that you both work for the same parent company. She said that corporate HR departments take violations of their fraternization and ethics policies very, very seriously, especially when it involves a public scandal. A single email with a photo attachment is all it takes. Think about that while you're loading your boxes. The effect was instantaneous. Gary went pale. Cheryl let out a strangled sob. Even my mother and Janet looked momentarily stunned. I had hit them where it hurt, their careers, their public image. Without another word, I slammed the heavy door shut. I leaned against it, my body trembling, as the muffled sounds of arguing and crying filtered through the wood. I listened as they clumsily loaded his things into the trunk of the Buick, realizing quickly it wouldn't all fit. I heard the frantic, humiliating phone calls as they tried to rent a U-Haul trailer, their credit cards declined one by one. Finally, I heard my mother's weary, defeated voice giving her own credit card number over the phone. When the sound of the Buick's engine finally faded down the street, the silence that returned was different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. I had defended my fortress. But I was utterly, completely alone. The days that followed were a blur of gray. The house, my fortress, began to feel like a prison. The silence I had fought for now felt oppressive, amplifying the echoes of my old life. I'd find one of Gary's stray socks under the sofa and the grief would hit me like a physical force, knocking the wind out of me. I'd see a brand of cereal at the grocery store that Cheryl used to love and have to abandon my cart and flee to my car. The box of pain in my mind had burst open, and I was drowning. I stopped answering the phone. I let the mail pile up on the hall table, unopened. I subsisted on coffee and toast, the effort of cooking a real meal feeling monumental. I would sit on the sofa for hours, the TV on but muted, just watching the images flicker across the screen. I was in shock, moving through the world like a ghost in my own home. My friend Carol left worried voicemails. "Brenda, honey, call me. I'm worried about you. Please, just let me know you're okay." I couldn't bring myself to call her back. How could I even begin to explain? And then, while I was adrift in my own private hell, they launched their public assault. It began, as most modern betrayals do, on Facebook. Cheryl posted first. It was a long, rambling screed, full of therapeutic buzzwords like my truth and authenticity. She wrote about feeling unseen in our family, always in my shadow. She painted a picture of Gary as her unlikely soulmate, a man who had also been stifled and misunderstood. She concluded with a tearful-sounding paragraph about how she hoped, one day, her controlling and unforgiving older sister would find it in her heart to be happy for them. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive victimhood. Gary's post followed a few hours later. He chose a black-and-white photo of himself looking thoughtfully out a window, like some kind of tortured poet. He wrote about the quiet desperation of his marriage to me, a life of endless spreadsheets and emotional voids. He claimed he had been financially abused, his every penny scrutinized, and had finally found the courage to break free and choose joy. My mother and Janet were their loyal foot soldiers. They shared both posts with gushing captions. "So proud of my brave daughter for following her heart," my mother wrote. "This is what true courage looks like," Janet commented under Gary's post. The narrative took hold like a virus. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years started sending me messages, dripping with pity. "Brenda, I had no idea things were so awful for you both." An aunt commented on my mother's share, "Family is everything. I hope you can all heal." They were publicly trying, convicting, and sentencing me in the court of social media, and I was too paralyzed by grief to even mount a defense. That's when Roger called. Roger, my old friend from college, the quiet genius who worked in cybersecurity. He didn't text first. He just called, and when I saw his name, something made me answer. "Brenda," he said, his voice calm and direct. "I've seen the circus on Facebook. Are you okay?" "No," I whispered, the first honest word I'd spoken to anyone in days. Good, he said, which surprised me. That means you're sane. Now listen to me. Do not engage with them online. Do not post a single word. But we are not going to let this stand. This is slander, and we are going to fight it with facts. How, Roger? My voice cracked. It's a bunch of lies. It's their story against mine. No, it's not, he said firmly. It's their story against their own. These people, they're arrogant. They think they're smarter than everyone else. That makes them sloppy. Did they ever use Facebook Messenger to talk? The memory surfaced through the fog. Yes. They used it constantly, thinking it was their private channel. All the time, I said. That's all I need to know, Roger said. I'm going to send you an email. Follow the instructions exactly. Don't ask questions. Just do it. An hour later, an email with the subject line "Your archive" appeared. It contained a link and a simple set of instructions to download my own Facebook data, including a complete history of my messages. I followed his steps, and a few minutes later, another email arrived with a large zip file attached. I opened it. It was a searchable archive of my entire Facebook history. Following Roger's next set of instructions, I opened the message folder. And there it was. Everything. Years of conversations. I searched for Cheryl. For the next 3 hours, I sat there and read. It was like voluntarily walking through my own personal horror movie. I saw their affair unfold in real time. The initial flirting. The first secret lunch date. The lies they concocted to cover their tracks. The way they mocked me. They made fun of the birthday gift I'd painstakingly chosen for him. They laughed about a time I'd tripped on the sidewalk. They called me the warden. And then I found the smoking gun. The message from Cheryl that laid the whole rotten conspiracy bare. He's so clueless. I've been siphoning money from their joint account for months. I just tell him it's for groceries or house stuff. Almost have enough for our dream getaway wedding. Can't wait to see Brenda's stupid face when she realizes I took her for everything. The joint account. The household account that was funded entirely by my salary and my inheritance. I felt a surge of white-hot rage that burned away the fog of grief. I immediately logged into my bank's website and downloaded the last 18 months of statements for that account. I went through them, line by line, with a highlighter, marking every single cash withdrawal, every questionable purchase. The total was over $10,000. I didn't write a rebuttal. I didn't try to tell my side of the story. I let them tell it for me. I took screenshots. Dozens of them. The most damning messages. The highlighted bank statements. I created a new photo album on my Facebook page and titled it The Truth. I uploaded every single screenshot, one after another, and then I posted the album publicly. My only comment was a quote from one of their own messages. I guess his face wasn't the only one that looked stupid. I turned off my computer, walked into the kitchen, and poured my first glass of wine in a week. My phone started buzzing on the counter and didn't stop for the rest of the night. The war was over. When a cornered animal is about to give up, it often has one last, violent burst of frantic energy. It's a desperate, final struggle for survival. That's the best way I can describe what Gary and Cheryl did next. Their carefully crafted image as tragic soulmates had been shattered by their own words, and their humiliation sent them into a spiral of increasingly bizarre and pathetic acts of retaliation. The first move was an attempt to destabilize my career. Gary, knowing he couldn't intimidate me, convinced his father to do his dirty work. His dad, a man who always presented himself as a pillar of the community, called my boss, Mr. Henderson. I found out later because Mr. Henderson called me into his office the next day. He closed the door, sat down behind his big oak desk, and looked at me over his glasses. My heart sank. I thought, this is it. They've managed to ruin this for me, too. Brenda, he said, his voice grave. I received a call yesterday from a gentleman named Frank Martin. Gary's father, I presume? I nodded, my mouth dry. He told me a very concerning story, Mr. Henderson continued. He said that you were emotionally unstable, that you were engaged in a campaign of harassment against his family, and that he was deeply worried your personal issues were affecting your professional judgment. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. He suggested that, for my company's own good, I should consider placing you on an extended leave of absence. I just stared at him, speechless. Mr. Henderson leaned forward. So, I told him that I have had the privilege of working with you for 12 years, and in that time, you have been the most competent, reliable, and professional person on my team. I told him that your personal life is precisely that, personal, and that if he ever called my office again with such slanderous accusations, I would have our corporate lawyer contact him directly. Then I hung up. A wave of relief so intense it made me dizzy washed over me. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, I whispered. He just nodded. Don't thank me. Just keep up the good work. And Brenda, take a few personal days if you need them. On me. Their next gambit was even more brazen. Around 3 a.m. one Wednesday night, my phone lit up with a notification from my new security camera system. Motion detected at front window. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and watched the live feed on my phone. The grainy, infrared image showed Cheryl, her hair a mess, trying to pry open my living room window with a rusty trowel from my garden shed. Gary was standing behind her, hiding in the shadows of the porch, frantically gesturing for her to be quiet. She was drunk, weeping, and mumbling about needing to get her grandmother's pearls. The same pearls our grandmother was still alive and well enough to wear. I hit the panic button on the security app, which blared a siren and flashed the exterior lights. They scrambled off my lawn like terrified raccoons, just as a police car rounded the corner. They didn't get arrested, but the police report for attempted trespassing was another lovely piece of evidence for my lawyer. After that, it was just a string of petty, pathetic acts. Gary told a mutual acquaintance that I had a secret gambling problem. Cheryl told my cousin that I'd killed her childhood hamster. It was all noise, the desperate buzzing of two wasps trapped in a jar. But the absolute peak of their delusional entitlement came from Dolores, Gary's mother. She called me one afternoon, her voice a syrupy blend of fake concern and condescension. Brenda, dear, she started. I've been thinking about this whole terrible situation. It's just a tragedy. A complete tragedy. It is, I agreed, waiting. And I know you're hurt, she continued. But marriage is a sacred vow. It's about forgiveness. It's about being the bigger person when your partner makes a mistake. Gary knows he made a mistake. A silly, boyish mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. I stayed silent, letting her spin her web. He's under so much pressure, dear. That new promotion came with so much responsibility, and a higher salary means higher expectations. The stress of a nasty divorce right now, it could be devastating for his career. He could lose everything he's worked for. And that poor girl, Cheryl, she has nothing. She can't support him. He can't afford a new wife right now. The audacity was stunning. She was pitching me a financial and logistical argument for taking back my cheating husband. Dolores, I finally said, my voice dangerously calm. Let me make sure I understand. You're asking me to take back my husband, who cheated on me with my sister, married her, and then tried to publicly destroy me, because it would be financially inconvenient for him to face the consequences? There was a huff of indignation on the other end. Well, there's no need to be so crass about it. When you put it like that, you just sound selfish and bitter. I thought you were a better Christian than that, Brenda. That was it. That was the last straw. Thank you for your concern, Dolores, I said, my voice dripping with ice. You've given me a lot to think about. Goodbye. I hung up before she could reply. I blocked her number, my mother's number, and Janet's number. I was done with all of them. The extinction burst was over. All that was left was to put the animal out of its misery. The day of the first official hearing was gray and overcast, a perfect mirror of my mood. I wasn't sad or angry anymore. I was just weary. I was tired of the fight, tired of the drama, and I just wanted it to be over. I walked up the marble steps of the county courthouse, my sensible heels clicking with a purpose I didn't entirely feel. My lawyer, Margaret, was waiting for me inside, a chic, reassuring presence in a perfectly tailored suit. She gave my arm a squeeze. Deep breaths, Brenda. This is just a preliminary hearing, but we can get a lot done today. Let them make themselves look foolish. We entered the courtroom, and there they were. Gary and Cheryl, sitting side by side at the opposing table with their lawyer. They looked awful. The defiant arrogance was gone, replaced by a pasty, sleep-deprived anxiety. Gary's suit was ill-fitting, and Cheryl was dressed in a drab beige cardigan, looking like she was trying to fade into the woodwork. They refused to look at me. Their lawyer, a man with slicked-back hair and an overly confident smile, began. He launched into a speech about the sanctity of marriage and the tragedy of its dissolution. He painted Gary as a good man who had been suffering from a severe, undiagnosed depressive episode, which led to a temporary lapse in judgment. He described Cheryl as a deeply empathetic woman who had simply tried to offer comfort to a man in pain, and their relationship had unexpectedly blossomed from a place of mutual support. He actually used the phrase a tragic, beautiful mistake. I thought Margaret was going to laugh out loud. The judge, a formidable woman named Judge Alani with sharp, intelligent eyes, remained impassive. When it was Margaret's turn, she walked to the podium not with a speech, but with a thick, three-ring binder. Your Honor, she said, her voice cutting through the stuffy courtroom air. We're not here today to psychoanalyze Mr. Martin's midlife crisis. We are here because Mr. Martin, while legally married to my client, entered into a second, fraudulent marriage with my client's sister. This was not a lapse in judgment. It was the culmination of a calculated, 18-month-long affair, which also involved the systematic theft of over $10,000 from my client. She opened the binder. I am submitting into evidence a full, unedited transcript of their electronic communications, which detail the affair, the financial deception, and their malicious intent. I'd like to direct the court's attention to page 47. The slick lawyer shot up. Objection. My client's private messages are not admissible. They were sent on a shared family data plan owned and paid for by my client, Margaret countered without missing a beat. There is no legal expectation of privacy. Furthermore, they are directly relevant to the financial claims and the grounds for divorce. Objection overruled, the judge said, a flicker of interest in her eyes. Proceed, counselor. Margaret looked down at the page. On May 12, Mr. Martin wrote to Ms. Evans, Brenda is so wrapped up in her budget spreadsheets, she hasn't noticed a thing. It's like taking candy from a baby. On June 3, Ms. Evans wrote, don't worry about her finding out. She's too boring and predictable to ever suspect anything. She paused, letting the words sink in. Then she delivered the final blow. And finally, Your Honor, on page 62, a message from Mr. Martin to Ms. Evans, regarding their plans post-Vegas, can't wait to see Brenda's stupid face when she realizes I took her for everything. A collective gasp went through the small gallery. The judge slowly took off her reading glasses and leaned forward, pinning Gary with a glacial stare. Mr. Martin, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Is that an accurate quote? Gary looked like a fish out of water, his mouth opening and closing. It was a joke, he croaked. Taken out of context. A joke? Judge Alani's voice was laced with disbelief. Mr. Martin, I have presided over hundreds of divorce cases. I have seen anger, sadness, and betrayal. But I have rarely seen such premeditated, documented cruelty. Please, enlighten the court. In what context is planning to steal from your wife and revel in her pain funny? Gary wilted under her gaze. He sank back into his chair, all the air gone out of him. Cheryl burst into tears. Their lawyer just stared at his legal pad as if it held the secrets to the universe. The judge looked from them back to Margaret. "Counselor," she said, "I believe I have everything I need to make a preliminary ruling on spousal support and exclusive use of the marital home. Which, I see from this deed, isn't actually marital property at all." She smiled, a thin, sharp, terrifying smile. "This shouldn't take long." The final ruling, delivered a few weeks after that first hearing, was a swift and brutal execution of Gary and Cheryl's hopes. The judge was as good as her word. She did not take long. The divorce was granted, effective immediately. The grounds cited were adultery and fraud. The judge made a point of noting the overwhelming and unambiguous evidence of malicious intent. Then she moved on to the assets. It was beautifully simple. I was awarded the house, free and clear, as it was my premarital property. I was awarded 100% of my own retirement accounts and savings, including the what-if fund he hadn't known about. I was awarded the car I drove. Gary was awarded his personal belongings, which were, at that point, costing his mother a small fortune in storage unit fees. He was awarded the leased SUV he drove, along with the remaining 2 years of payments. And then, Judge Alani delivered the piece de resistance. Regarding spousal support, she announced, looking directly at Gary. The court recognizes that Ms. Martin was the primary financial provider for the duration of the marriage. Evidence shows that she fully supported Mr. Martin through his recent executive certification program, a program that directly resulted in his substantial promotion and salary increase. She paused for effect. Therefore, the court orders Mr. Martin to pay rehabilitative alimony to Ms. Martin to compensate for the financial and emotional damages incurred. The amount will be $500 per month for a period of 1 year. A strangled noise came from Gary's throat. His lawyer put a hand on his arm to keep him in his seat. The idea that he, the supposed victim, would have to send me a check every month was more than his fragile ego could handle. The look of pure, impotent fury on his face was more satisfying than any financial settlement could ever be. But the real show began after we left the courtroom. The air outside was thick with unspoken rage. My mother, Janet, and Dolores were all there, lurking near the courthouse steps like vultures waiting for a carcass. They had come for their own final showdown. My mother, Eleanor, got to me first. Her face was a mask of tight, angry lines. "How could you do this, Brenda?" she hissed, her voice loud enough for passers-by to turn and look. "You've left your own sister with nothing. You are a cold, vengeful woman. I raised you better than this." Suddenly, Dolores stepped between us, her face flushed with her own brand of maternal fury. "My son is the one with nothing," she shrieked at my mother. "Your tramp of a daughter lured him in and now he's paying the price. She's a homewrecker." "Gary is a grown man who makes his own choices," my mother yelled back, completely forgetting that just moments before, she had been blaming me for everything. It was a spectacular implosion. Janet jumped in, calling Dolores a delusional old bat. Dolores called Janet a jealous shrew. Janet tried to throw her half-empty water bottle at Dolores, but her aim was terrible, and it hit my mother instead, splashing all over her perfectly coiffed hair. My mother let out a scream of outrage and shoved Janet, who stumbled backward, into Cheryl. It was a full-scale, four-woman meltdown on a public sidewalk. People were stopping to stare, phones were coming out. 2 burly security guards started moving towards them. Throughout this whole chaotic scene, I realized Gary was nowhere to be seen. He had vanished. Dolores realized it at the same time. She stopped screaming at my mother and looked around wildly. "Where is he? Gary! Where did my son go?" Then, in a voice laced with pure venom, she screamed at Cheryl, who was sobbing nearby. "He's probably run off with that little bartender, Tiffany. That's who he was texting all morning." A 22-year-old piece of trash he met at the casino. He's left you too, you stupid girl. That was the final blow for Cheryl. The foundation of her entire fantasy, that she was the great love of Gary's life, crumbled in that instant. She sank to the sidewalk, a heap of beige cardigan and broken dreams, and began to wail. It was a raw, ugly, primal sound of absolute despair. This wasn't supposed to happen, she sobbed over and over. He promised me. Janet, for a fleeting second, showed a flicker of sisterly duty. She bent down. It's okay, Cheryl, she said awkwardly. You can come stay with me. Cheryl looked up, her face streaked with tears and mascara. I can't stay with you, she wailed. Your apartment smells like cats and sadness. That was it. That was the final insult. Janet stood up, her face hardening into a mask of disgust, and walked away without a backward glance. I stood there, a few feet away, with Margaret by my side. She just looked at the scene, then at me, and shook her head. And they say lawyers are the dramatic ones, she murmured. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt like I had just watched the final, chaotic, pathetic scene of a movie I was no longer a part of. Watching my family detonate on the courthouse steps was a strange, out-of-body experience. It was like seeing the final scene of a terrible play. The curtain had fallen, the actors were a mess, and I was already walking out of the theater, blinking in the bright, clean sunlight. In that moment, watching them scream and cry, I didn't feel a shred of hatred or triumph. I just felt done. Utterly and completely free. If you're still listening, could you do me a huge favor? Please like this video and comment with the number 1 down below. It lets me know you've given me a thumbs up, and it tells me you've been with me on this whole journey. Your support is an incredible encouragement for me. Please, just comment the number 1, and then let me tell you what happened next. The dust from that explosion settled slowly over the next few months, and news of the fallout came to me in bits and pieces, through the reluctant gossip of aunts and cousins who had finally decided which side of the family they were on. Gary's story was probably the most pathetic. As Dolores had screamed, he had indeed started seeing Tiffany, the 22-year-old bartender. Their romance lasted just long enough for her to max out the new credit card he'd foolishly gotten. When she found out he was not only divorced but had also been fired from his high-paying job for the ethics violation, she vanished, leaving him with a mountain of debt and a broken lease on the apartment they'd rented. The last I heard, he was back in his childhood bedroom in his mother Dolores's house, a 40-something man sleeping under a poster of a race car. The alimony checks, however, arrive every month like clockwork. I have them direct deposited into a fund I've named the Karma account. Cheryl's life became a quiet tragedy. After being publicly disowned by Janet on the courthouse steps, she had nowhere to go. She ended up having to beg Janet to let her stay in the apartment that smelled of cats and sadness. They lived together now, 2 bitter women marinating in their shared resentment. Cheryl couldn't find a job in her field, the scandal had followed her. She works part-time at a discount shoe store now. Dolores followed through on her threat and is, in fact, suing her in small claims court for the money Gary spent on her during their affair. It's a ridiculous, petty lawsuit that will likely go nowhere, but it's a constant source of stress and humiliation for her. My family, as I knew it, no longer exists. My mother and I have not spoken since that day. She sends a birthday card every year, signed simply, Eleanor. It's a cold, formal gesture that says everything by saying nothing. Janet and Cheryl barely speak to each other, living as resentful roommates. My father, who remained a silent, passive observer through the whole thing, now lives in a house filled with a tense, miserable silence. It's a landscape of ashes, and every single one of them lit their own match. One evening, months later, I received a text from an unknown number. I know you hate me, but you ruined my life and I hope you are happy. I knew it was Cheryl. I just typed back, I am, actually. Thanks for asking. Then I blocked the number. About 6 months after the divorce, I put the house on the market. It was a good house, filled with 15 years of memories, but the good ones were tainted, and the bad ones were starting to seep into the walls. The day the sold sign went up on the lawn, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in years. With the profits from the sale and the money from my inheritance, I was financially secure and completely untethered for the first time in my adult life. I didn't buy another house. I bought a new life. I found a bright, modern condo in a part of the city I'd always loved, full of bookstores and little cafes. It had a balcony that caught the morning sun and was half the size of my old house, which meant half the cleaning and half the baggage. The process of unpacking was a joy. I wasn't making space for anyone else's things, I was curating my own happiness. I bought a bright yellow sofa, something Gary would have hated. I hung art that I loved on the walls. I filled the space with plants and books and music. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life not just on the outside, but on the inside. I started going to the gym again, not to lose weight, but because it felt good to be strong. I reconnected with old friends, like Carol, who had left me worried voicemails. We met for lunch, and I told her the whole story. She listened, she cried with me, she got righteously angry for me, and then she made me laugh until my sides hurt. I started to feel like myself again. That's where I met Frank. He was in my Saturday morning spin class, a man with kind eyes and a laugh that crinkled the corners of them. He was a retired high school history teacher with a passion for bad puns and good coffee. Our friendship started with casual chats after class, which turned into walking to the coffee shop together, which turned into dinner. On our third date, I told him everything. I laid all the ugly, messy cards on the table, half expecting him to run for the hills. He listened to the whole crazy story without interrupting once. When I was finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Well," he said. "The first thing that tells me is that you are tougher than a $2 steak. The second is that I am very, very glad I am not Gary." And I laughed. A real, from-the-gut laugh. We're taking things slow. It's easy, and it's calm, and it's the healthiest relationship I've ever known. He brings me coffee sometimes from the little shop near his place, and he always has the barista write Frank's favorite Brenda on the cup. It's silly, but it makes my heart feel full. Last month, I visited Margaret to update my will. That framed copy of Gary and Cheryl's Vegas marriage certificate is still hanging on her wall. We both looked at it and started laughing. I don't live in the past anymore. The anger is gone. The hurt has faded to a scar that reminds me of what I survived. I built a fortress that day, not just with new locks and changed passwords, but within myself. I learned that I am my own safe harbor. I am my own protector. I didn't get the life I planned, but I got something better. I got a life that is truly, completely, and unapologetically mine. And it is a beautiful life. Thank you for letting me share it with you.